Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where 12 crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 15 of Leverage Redemption. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I was actually quite surprised with that opening when it ended up I was like, oh, because you're wondering where this was all going to be, where the case was going to be in all of this. Obviously, I brought up the fact is Harry's daughter, but it didn't even cross my mind to think that that girl was Harry's daughter, Becky. But aside from that, I appreciate some Doctor Who references, which is weird to say Doctor Who reference, because when Harry's bringing in the mail, it's right, the mail's sent in from all over the places. Hardison, just has his aliases, so, one was D. Tennant, David Tennant, and the other was Tom Baker, which, it's weird to call those references, because they're just actors who just happen to play the Doctor at different points in time, but then you do have an actual reference with Miss River Song being an actual character, so I'm wondering why that's just so funny. I guess maybe because, I guess Tennant and maybe Tom Baker might be, some of the more well-known Doctors, some of, the fan favorites. I know Tennant's definitely, a lot of people's favorite. If you're curious who my personal favorite is, I'm an 11th stand. I'm Matt Smith, my favorite Doctor. Some of my favorite seasons in Doctor Who history, probably series 6 might be my favorite, but because it and 5 are the only ones I've ever watched repeatedly. I've never seen any other season of Doctor Who more than once, and I saw both of them at least twice because they were so damn good. Regardless, tangents and all that aside. Wait, I'm trying to think. Did I rewatch? I might have actually rewatched series 10 in preparation for series 11. No, series 11 in preparation for series 12. I don't remember. I think I did. Yeah. Never mind. Take it back. I was like, yeah. But yeah, still, regardless. Tangents and all that aside. And we also got mail for a teddy bear and an Alice White, which I was like, hey! Alice White's one of Parker's aliases. Is the one she met Peggy under. One of her besties. So I think that's pretty dope. But turns out Sophie has some mail as well, and it's about a theater, and it's tied into one of her students from her Portland. I wonder, is it going to be the main? Well, he's not British, so I don't think it'd be him. But I guess it's one of the other. Well, not unless he went off and started something in the UK or something. But I was almost thinking might be the main student she had in Portland. Maybe he'd be the one that did it, but maybe it's someone else. Maybe it's just kind of a student you don't really get to know, but yeah, now Sophie's thinking about leaving. I mean, this was always supposed to be a temporary thing, and obviously you can tell Parker doesn't sit well, because for her, it's her family's mostly back together. It's she's already got to deal with the fact that Hardison's kind of away for a bit, but now on top of that, it's now the thought of oh, Sophie leaving too, just now that we're back together after all these years, and it's sadly they don't have Nate, but at least they have Sophie. It feels some void to some extent, but now they're oh, I think Parker was almost hoping, the good times would keep rolling, and now knowing oh, Sophie might leave. But interestingly enough, Harry gets contacted by Becky, who wants to because obviously her new stepdad, he's in the middle of what ends up being a larger kind of conspiracy case and stuff like that. Essentially, he works with an oil company that basically, well, trailing back a little bit, basically Becky wanted her dad to look into it, because it's right, she's you're trying to be better, you're trying to help people, just well, help mom, help me, but it's he's a good guy, I mean, obviously he's never got mixed up with bad people, and Harry's like me? He's no, I get it, you're 100% right, but she's yeah, please help him look into this. And obviously the team has reservations against doing this, because whoa, you want us to help a big oil CEO? It's what was the Monopoly man busy? So it's kind of Brianna's kind of no, and obviously he doesn't fit into the category of their typical, person that they they typically don't help people of this nature. They help take down people of this nature. But Harry is nah, he's a good guy. And it's Brianna's oh, that's how you're going to tell us that he gives money to a charity. Well, he does give to a charity. So I think it's because someone like Harry, who is kind of a little corruptible, I think for him, it's if he could see a good guy in Ethan, then that means because it's he probably looked at Ethan and saw everything that he necessarily wasn't. So for him, maybe because of that, or maybe he was so desperate to for his ex-wife and daughter to be happy that he had blinders on. It's just or maybe it's just he never bothered looking too deep because he didn't think to look too deep, because he just kind of, it's so interesting, someone who, but I guess even in his own perspective, his view of things, he kind of still kept everything surface level, he never looked too deep beyond the surface, because maybe he just took people for who they presented themselves to be, which is interesting considering the lawyer that you are, that kind of started like on the very not even morally ambiguous, like very leaning to the dark side. So it's like it's so interesting that he would never look too deep into Ethan. But granted, he has a team who makes a living doing that, taking down this type of person, digging deep. But obviously, it's the conversation. All right, he married my ex-wife, which once again, just like the parallels, like I don't know if they do a lot of this to be not a one for one, but just kind of like give you certain vibes of like Harry with the whole ex-wife situation, Nate with the whole ex-wife situation with Maggie. So it's actually kind of interesting because, well, it's a little bit of a different circumstance because Maggie ended up dating that guy, was it Alexander or whatever, and he ended up not being a bad guy. He was kind of oblivious to everything that was going on around him, so it's a little different, but obviously that relationship didn't like pan out, didn't work out, so there's that. But so there's a little bit of a parallel there, but it's like, you know, he wants to kind of look into this and make sure like everything's okay. And it turns out that, well, they were able to get help from Maria, which I love the whole thing of like, yeah, I could call someone for help. And then that's what Elliot was saying. And then Parker was like, yeah, I know a marshal I can call. And Elliot's like, no, I was going to call Maria. Like, I was going to call her. He's like, oh, she's like, oh, what a coincidence. Like, oh, things between you two are getting serious. And he's like, no, it's not like that. But we also had Brianna going on strike, which I love. Parker being like, I didn't know we could do that. It's like, Elliot's like, it doesn't come up that often. I mean, like, and it's like, honestly, and that has to be on purpose, that Brianna out of anyone, I mean, because she's super, like, anti, like, I think big corporation and just, like, companies of this nature, because she's like, I see you for being big and evil corporation, even though Harry can't see it. But also, like, Hardison has done that before, where it's just like, he was kind of temporarily on strike of like, no, go ahead, run things, see what happens. And it's like, especially when he wanted to do his own con and everyone kind of brushed him to the side. He's like, yeah, you trying to figure, like, you know, he was kind of acting like a little bit of a baby about it. Not saying Brianna is, but it's just like, you can tell, like, it's I think supposed to submit just like how similar, like, Brianna takes after her big bro, you know? So I love that Harry's like, yeah, there's hacking manuals here left by Hardison. Like, I mean, how hard could it be? And they try to do it, and like, obviously all the power ends up shutting down. I love, like, Brianna being like, oh, stupid little lawyer man. But at the same time, Elliot and Parker get help with Maria, and she's the one that sent him the thing about teddy bears. She's like, oh, I knew how angry it make you because you're so cute when you're like angry. And I'm like, aw, things are hitting off nicely between them. But there's a thing of like, she's like, so why are you visiting this guy? He's like, I'm going to find out sooner or later who you actually work for. And he's just like, so that's a complicated thing. Because none of them have ever been in that situation where like, law enforcement, they've had ties to law enforcement, as I brought up, like Detective Bonanno, like, you know, there's been that relationship, but never like in like connected relationship like this. So it changes things a little bit in that regard. But yeah, other than that, they end up visiting the guy, but it turns out like someone tried to kill him, and they meet Lowe, who is a attorney. Apparently he's suing GP because like everything Ethan did was just publicity stunts, like Seeley wiping up the oils are all for like just for the cameras, because they're rather essentially one of their oil rigs is still leaking oil, but they wanted to put it up, pretend like, oh, they're doing a lot, when in actuality they didn't. Basically this deals with a girl, it's the guy who was taking a picture. His granddaughter, Sarah, was a guy, leukemia, and it's a byproduct of oil leaking into like the well water, and like into the wells, and it's like poisoning their water. So GP is being sued for $10 million, and they don't want to pay. They're trying to protect ignorance, like, oh, like everything's, you know, above board. And obviously they've got 3 days until it's time to go to court, and he doesn't have any evidence. And like the grandfather, you know, wanted to help, even though the lawyer kept being like, don't get mixed up in this. So now everything gets flipped around, where it's just like, for Harry, it's like, wow, like this guy is not who I thought he was. And obviously Brianna got the big celebration of, I told you so. So they look deeper into it, and so it's a situation of, well, now they're going to have to find like all the evidence necessary, especially because Harry ends up meeting with Ethan, and he's with Grace, and it's like, yeah, they're all very cordial. And then Harry just keeps asking Ethan, like, you know, kind of, oh, like, is there something more to it? Which obviously he didn't tell Grace anything about like the lawsuit and stuff. He's like, yeah, I wanted to pay, but the lawyers told me not to. But then like later on, obviously for Harry, which I love that whole thing about Parker being like, what was it? Oh, look at him. Like, he's so, like, she was making references to him being so young, and then she got his ID. Oh, look, because she was trying to card him or whatever, just to kind of buy time so they could clone his phone and get the encryption so they can meet up with his lawyer team, which I love the whole, like, Sophie and Brianna thing. But like, oh, like, yeah, we're here to judge you and categorize you and stuff like that. I love that. Taking very, like, various notes of, like, yo, what's Brianna, like, what's she over here writing? And it's just like, oh, like, oh, personal laptop, like, little things like here to kind of, like, take a strike against him, but it was mainly just to look at the reports and stuff. But obviously when Harry found out, like, right, like, Ethan, he lied to my face, and now they have to decide what to do. Like, Brianna, Elliot, and Parker are going to go on board. Parker's going to pretend to be the doctor, which I'm like, even in the pretend scenario they're creating, it's like, you know what Parker would do, being the weirdo, being like, like, are you really trusting? But it's like, okay, I guess kind of like Brianna's got to do the hacking, I've got to be the muscle in case anyone gets in the way, and Parker's got to play the role of the doctor, and then Elliot's fighting some people, and I love Brianna being like, why are you covered in oil? He's like, well, this oil, well, oil, you know, it happens. It's like, well, if there was oil happening, we wouldn't be having the issues that we have when it comes to oil. And Brianna's like, ooh, kind of up high fives herself, like, ooh, that was a good one. And it's like, stop. She's like, sorry. You know, are you upset because of my, like, my joke about you? And then Parker's like, is his eyebrows furrowed? Because that means he's mad. And it's like, yep. But while they're coming up with this plan, Harry left, and he's standing outside his ex's place, and it's like, for Sophie, it's like, this is hard, you know, she ends up tracking him down and talking to him. For him, it's like, he felt like he never deserved his wife and daughter just because of, you know, everything that he did. And when he met Ethan, he thought, oh, Ethan was a good guy. He like, here's a guy who actually deserves him. But now it turns out neither one of us deserves him. And it's like, at the end of the day, is that what your redemption has always been about? You know, Grace and Becky. And he talks about how he justified it at the end of the day was, you know, it's like, right, I never did anything bad because I represented these people who did terrible things, but I never did anything terrible myself. He's like, that's how I justified it. And Sophie was like, yeah, you got to kind of like recalibrate your worldview, because, you know, it's like, things aren't like super black and white, like, you know, because obviously not all bad guys are bad guys, you know? And obviously, you know, Harry is like, how does she recalibrate her perspective on things? And I forgot what she was saying. Essentially, it was because of what they do that it, you know, because, you know, once again, like, look at them, like, in a black and white world, they're bad guys, but in a, like there is a gray area to it. They are bad guys who make the best good guys, you know? So... And it's about changing your perspective, recalibrating your perspective on things. So later on, Harry wants to tell, you know, Grace about Ethan, but ultimately he doesn't have time because the process got shortened because turns out the lawyers and stuff like that are moving to dismiss the case. So rather than having like the couple days they were going to have, they have less time to get the evidence off the rig because there's no like computers or anything. So it's not like they can hack it and then like send it back. Like nothing's going to be able to get out. They would have to physically take all the data off of the rig. And so at the same time, Elliot gets a call from Maria, and obviously she's like, oh, I got this chili, like, you know, she kind of wants to have like a date night, go somewhere, and he's like, right, I'm kind of in the middle of something. And it's like, he doesn't explain what he's actually doing, which she's like, yeah, like, she knew that there'd be some inconsistencies with like who she is and him doing like the shady stuff that she does, but it's like, with the shady stuff that he does, so it's like conversations that they're gonna have to figure out. Which I love that he actually goes to Parker for. Even she was like, wait, you're asking me for relationship advice? He's like, holy crap. Because, like, you know, Parker only in the past couple years learned how to kind of be more human. She kind of, like, wasn't the most human out there. But it's like, oh, yeah. He's like, yeah, I've always kind of thought that you and Hardison, like, I was, you know, always liked yours and Hardison's relationship. And she's like, oh. And so essentially she was talking about the fact is that, well, with Hardison, it works because Hardison saw her for her. And so it's kind of like you need to someone who'll see you for you. But for Elliot, it's like, but what if she can't look past like what I've done and kind of who I was, you know? And it's like, you know, it's like basically it comes down to, well, you got to find someone who can... Yes, what you've done, because he's like, God, I know it shouldn't matter. She's like, no, it does matter. It will matter. But you got to find someone who can look beyond that and, like, look beyond what you've done and just see, like, who you are as a person, what you're doing right now. And like for Elliot, it's like, but what if that's not enough when it comes to her? And then I just love Parker being, then I'll dangle her off a building until she died, and kind of slapped Elliot. So I was like, that's actually sweet. It's twisted, but that's Parker being twisted and sweet of like, yeah, I'll hang her off a building until she realizes how amazing you actually are, Elliot. And you see Elliot smile because he appreciates Parker saying that. You know, it meant a lot to him. So I thought that was really sweet. But I love that, like, Sophie calling him, they had to, like, fake the whole thing about having a baby. So Elliot didn't get his oil fight like he wanted. Instead, he gets, like, this big baby shower. Everyone's asking about this. He says, so how'd you meet the missus? Come on, have a beer. And I love, might be a little too on the nose. Not too on the nose, but just considering the past, you know, every year plus what still happening even to today is the whole thing of like, obviously Parker making that dude scared of just like making him think he's sick, and just like, she's like, don't open your mouth, and he opens his mouth, she's like, don't open your mouth, do you want to kill me? And putting like the mask on him and everything. I was like, oh, a little, probably like little on the nose about the current circumstance, like not on the nose, but might hit home a little too much in that circumstance. But obviously, Brianna can't get the data because the data is literally being altered just as it's, like, going to that computer. So there's no, like, getting it from the computer. They would have to, like, get the raw data itself before it even reaches the computer. They have to get it from the main system, but it's, like, that wouldn't give them enough time to deal with everything, especially when time is running out. Luckily, Sophie was able to kind of buy enough time. Plus, Harry was able to kind of, you know, step in as a lawyer, too, Harry's doing what he can to buy them time as well. But luckily there are cameras everywhere, so all they had to do was live stream the actual pipe leaking. And so Harry was able to like blow up everything in front of the court, and obviously Grace is there too, so showing up Ethan, and it's like, right, it does give them enough that now this is going to like what was it, the Supreme Court or something like that, like it's going to a different courtroom, that like this isn't getting dismissed because it needs further investigation, but now this is going to lead to like not only the payout for Sarah, because the whole thing is, if Lowe could win this, it's not only going to help Sarah, but eventually it can turn into a class action lawsuit, so a lot of people that were affected can get their money as well and be able to help, you know, compensate to some extent what damage was done by this company. And ultimately, Harry goes chasing after Grace, and it's like, right, this is what you want to tell me. He's like, I'm sorry. He's like, if you need anything, any place to stay, she's like, why would I need any place to stay? I was like, right, it's like, yeah, you might be kicking him out, but you're going to keep the place. It's like, no, she's not just going to keep the place. She's keeping him. And Harry's like, no, he poisoned people. She's like, no, like, he was just doing his job. I was like, that's a little, that's, I didn't know how to feel about it. I was like, that's kind of jacked up that she has that perspective. It's like, but I guess in her mind, it's like, you know, all he did was try to, like, he's not, because it's the thing of, like, it's kind of like, it's like Harry's justification for what he did. I never did anything bad. I just represented some bad people. I don't think Becky would agree with that perspective that her mom has, like, currently, because Harry kind of sees through the fall. I was like, no, he covered up, like, he wasn't willing to pay the $10 million to, well, because, like, it's like, well, her justification would be like, well, his lawyers told him not to because it would be admitting guilt, but he had nothing to do with that. That was the company. He was just there. But it's like, yeah, but he lied about it. Like, but for her, it's like, he's there for me. He's providing for me. He's there for you, for me, like, but you weren't. And he's like, I know I made mistakes. Like, yes, that's the thing. I'm like, did Harry actually think when it was all said and done that Grace and Becky, like, it all work out and they'd come back to him? Maybe on some level he did. I don't know. I thought he was just thinking, like, no, let me get them away from, like, this guy's not a good guy. And part of me wonders, like, is her perspective like that because of her marriage to Harry? Is it, like, was the main issue not the bad people he represented, but it was just because he wasn't there when she needed him on an emotional level and stuff like that? Like, obviously he wasn't there for his daughter, but like I said, I don't think she'd co-sign all this because it's like, it makes everything look super shady. But I'm like, I was taken back by that because you would think like, I mean, it's not like he was truthful to you about that. You didn't even know about the Sarah situation and just like, but I guess, I don't know. It seems a little not morally gray in her department, but maybe that's just me reading too deeply into it. But I'm like, it didn't seem like she was that great of a, but I mean, who knows? Maybe that's why her and Harry kind of were. I don't know. The fact is, not like she's co-signing everything, but like it seems like maybe at the end of the day she's just like, it was a lot to process and she's just trying to like justify it because like, yeah, this is someone she loves, like for you to be like, oh, this person's a monster. It's like, no, like he just did what he was supposed to do for his job. And I'm like, I don't know. That just he seems scummy, and I'm like, the fact that you would stay with him just seems kind of weird. Like I said, I'm curious, would Becky feel like that, you know? Because that was a big reason why, like, Harry also had reservations about this, because taking down Ethan would also mean, like, uprooting their lives, but apparently not, because Grace is all about staying. That's, you know, and obviously at the end, it's like, you know, Harry packed up and took all his stuff with him, and, like, you know, now he's gone, and it's like, things didn't go the way he wanted to, and so Sophie's like, he just needs time. But then you have Parker saying, like, really, like, oh, come on, like, we did a lot of good jobs, like, you don't need to go, you know, deal with some stupid, like, theater troupe. And it's like, you know, you always knew this was supposed to be my last tour, you know. And so for Parker, it's just like, she doesn't want to let Sophie go. Obviously, it's just like, once again, it's just like, well, Harry's gone, and now there's the situation of Sophie potentially leaving. She was worried a couple episodes ago about maybe Elliot leaving. So, but as I was almost like, oh, I'm surprised things are kind of resolved. I'll get to that in a second. But then it turns out they're not. The oil rig blew up, and a lot of people on it were killed. A lot of those people were there with Elliot. Yeah, it was under false pretenses, but it's still like, those were hardworking people just doing their job. They weren't aware of, like, what was, like, really going on. The company was kind of keeping that firm, but it's like, regardless of anything, they were just innocent people just doing their job, and they were taken from their families and stuff like that. Like, those were people Elliot was hanging around and got to know a little bit, probably because of the oil rig and everything, you know. I think it probably reminds Elliot a little bit too of, like, that job they had in the mines and stuff like that. It probably reminded him a little bit of that too. But to know, like, that the moment it's like, wow, they did this, whoever it was, they hired someone, outsourced it so it wouldn't be tied to GP. But the moment it's like, who could have done it? And then when Elliot squeezed his hands, it's like, he knew, it's like, it had to be RIZ, which we see Harry meeting with them later. It's getting in bed with the enemy, just because he knew, like, these were very, very bad people, and he has to seem like he's leaving the team just for the purpose of making RIZ think, like, oh, like, he's really all about this. Because him changing and leaving all behind and going back to who he was, they'll believe that. So he probably has to sell the story even more, because it's just, I think this is for the purposes of, like, he probably heard about it and knew that they were responsible, so he probably pieced it together himself and set this all in motion, like, I'm going to take these guys down from the inside, and, you know, and RIZ would give him the best access to it. So this would mean kind of going up against a team, but I do believe this is all part of his plan. It might turn into a situation where the team believes, like, Harry's going full dark side, and it's like, no, like, things didn't go his way, so now he decided to backpedal to his old ways. I don't think that's the case. Like I said, I think it's all for show. Not unless the show does go like, nah, he does, but makes up for it. But I think this is all part of the larger play for Harry. But yeah, like, I was wondering about the RIZ thing. Like, was that going to? It's like, yep. And here is, like, the final, like, touch on that. So the reason why I was kind of surprised what I brought up earlier is because I was thinking back to the original series. The original series. Most of the seasons, with the exception of the final season, had two-parters. Like, every finale was a two-parter. Like, two sides to, like, the same job, essentially. So that's why I thought this was like, oh, this getting resolved, I thought was interesting. But it's like, no, there's still more to it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the season finale takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.